Okay, so welcome back everyone to the Shop Stool Podcast. We have another guest this week down in Melbourne. So this is one of Bryan's friends again, Bryan's crew.
Like I said, never had the pleasure of meeting Jess, but yeah, we'll say we're friends.
So it's Jess Humpston from Victoria. Jess is part of the Victorian Woodworkers Association, so she knows her stuff. And I've read that you are also into fashion design, which I think is going to be a first for our podcast. So welcome to the show, Jess. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So a good way just to get everyone acquainted with who you are and what you do, could you just give us a brief rundown of how you got to being a woodworker, especially with the fashion background? I'm really interested in that.
Okay, sure. So I think like most of us, I always just loved working with my hands. As a kid, I was always quite crafty. I think even a few times I had made my mum take me to the tip shop and sort of collect a few items and make little weird sculptures out of it. So I've always loved creating and making. And then after school, I went to fashion school. And it was TAFE-based, so it was really heavily focused on making and crafting, pattern making, textiles, sewing, everything. And I just loved it, and I really loved sort of being able to design and make something yourself. You're not outsourcing the making. It's at a certain scale where you could design and make it yourself, and really loved sort of the fashion textiles aspect and how that is so closely connected to you as a person, you and your body. It's a very close sort of physical touch aspect to it. And when I graduated from fashion school, I had my own little label for a while, sort of kicked along with that for a few years.
Oh, wow.
But it all got... Yeah, I did. It was many years ago now. But I think it was quite intense being a designer maker, making everything yourself. And in fashion, you're not just making one piece, you're making that piece for many different sizes and a few of each. So it was quite a lot of work, and so I think I had a little bit of burnout. So I sort of, gave that up for a while, lived overseas, travelled a bit, and then when I came back to Australia, I actually studied interior architecture. And so for me, it was sort of a bit of a journey on scale of design. So I sort of scaled up. So instead of it was still a very intimate connection with sort of like experience and space, but it was, scaling up, and you're designing the whole space rather than just one single aspect of it. And then after I graduated from interior design, I moved to Melbourne and I worked in interiors, largely commercial design. So a lot of food and beverage, hospitality, hotels, some workplace galleries, kind of a bit of everything really. And that was my foray into full-time work. And I got a lot out of it, and I still am practicing actually as part-time as an interior designer, but I sort of never understood, and still don't, the full-time work sitting behind a desk at a computer all day, every day. It's like, it's quite tricky. And to sort of juxtapose that, or keep myself sane, I enrolled in part-time classes at the Victorian Woodworkers Association, and I did that for many years, and I just loved it, and it was sort of the highlight of my week, really. And I like that you could design, again, getting back to designing and making myself, rather than what I was doing in my professional practice, where I was getting great experience with design, but everything was outsourced, and there's so many players in the mix in terms of architecture and interiors that everything, there's a certain loss of control along the way. And I think I was like, I really want to do this. I just love furniture and I love woodworking, and I decided that I needed to sort of take the jump and really focus on it to be really good at it. A few hours a week at a part-time class is just not, it's a great outlet, but it's not going to cut it as a really great crafts person. So one of my tutors at the BWA had studied at Sturt School for Wood, And I had never heard of this place before, and she told me all about it, and I thought it was just this magical place. I was like, I need to go there. That sounds amazing. And
I think from all the guests we've had on, you might be the only one that's gone to Sturt.
Oh, really?
Probably. No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, we've definitely spoken about it lots of times on the podcast before, but I don't think anybody's been. I might be wrong.
Okay. Well, I'll give you a bit of an overview on Sturt. So it's a craft school based in the Southern Highlands in New South Wales, and it's been there. They just last year or the year before celebrated 80 years, so it's very well established. And they have, it's this in a beautiful setting. It's really green and lush, and it's quite romantic. And they have, a little cottage for woodworking, one for jewellery, one for ceramics, and they used to have one for weaving, not anymore. But it's just a real centre for craft in New South Wales, and I think even for Australia as well. And they hold an intensive year-long woodworking course there that's been running for about 30 years, in addition to part-time classes too. And so when I first heard about it, this was at the beginning of 2020, before everything changed. So I applied. It's sort of a lengthy application process. You apply a few months before, like many months before actually, and I applied and found out that I was going sort of midway through 2020, and that really, I think, was the thing that kept me going through the many, many months of Melbourne lockdown and, working from home and everything that went along with it. And then I, moved to New South Wales between lockdowns.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Yeah,
that definitely counts as, that's an essential service, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, managed to get there between having to quarantine, which was quite the feat. And yeah, it was it's a year-long intensive course. It's only 12 students. So it's very, very insular. We all get to know each other really well, and you become a little family. And it's sort of split up into 4 terms, and they have each term they have a visiting tutor from many different sort of areas of expertise, and it's just fantastic. It was such a great experience. And so that was 2021. I studied there, and then Sturt has a workshop space that they rent out to ex-students. So I stayed on with a few other people and did a residency there for about 6 months while I figured out what I wanted to do, because I think the most important thing for me was to keep going. Mm-hmm. I think it would have been very easy to just come back to normal life and sort of get swept up in work and, all those things. So I kept going, and then I moved back to Melbourne about this time last year, or maybe a little bit earlier, and I managed to snag a tenancy spot at the VWA. So they have a subsidised rent tenancy program for up-and-coming woodworkers, which is really fantastic. So I share a space with 4 other emerging woodworkers, and that's where I largely spend most of my time now. So as much time as I can get at the VWA, and then also my day job, sort of practicing in interiors still.
Yeah, cool. So at VWA, are you teaching classes as well?
I am. So you don't have to as a tenant, but a lot of tenants do that to sort of, it just helps with the bills, and it's also a great outlet to teach. You get to know what you know, and I think you get to really compound your learning when you're trying to explain it to somebody else who doesn't have a background in woodworking. So I find that it's challenging, but I think it really sort of solidifies what you know. And also they make so many different projects, so each student has a very different project, and so they make things that maybe you would never make as well. So I find it really interesting. Yeah.
Mm. And I reckon it kind of allows you to change your mindset of, being really focused on one piece for like 6 months or 3 months or however long it is, versus in the class having to jump like 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. And yeah, I think it changes the way you think about projects.
Yeah, and it really tests. I tend to really delve deep into each step of the process of what we make and spend so long on one piece. But you have to really be like rapid fire, sort of solving problems and helping students out along the way. So I think it's good training, I think.
Can I ask which when you were at Sturt, did you develop any of the pieces that we see? Like, is that where a chair came from?
Yeah, so I didn't make the final piece when I was studying, but I made a mock-up, so a really good mock-up actually. And so at Sturt, yes, they sort of focus, they give you a broad range of skills, and the last term, or it was about maybe 6 to 7 weeks, is you make a chair. So we all made a chair, or at least going through the process of making a chair, learning about the engineering and comfort and, all these things that make up a chair. And I never finished it, but I designed it and sort of made a good step in the right direction of the chair. So I developed it basically when I was at Sturt, and then I made the final piece when I was doing my residency the following year.
For anybody who doesn't, it is called chair, but it's chair.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure if people Google it, they'll know it, because it is massively done the rounds, and it obviously was one of the projects that got you the Wood Review Maker of the Year last year.
Yeah.
It's an incredible career to have gone from learning it in 2021 to being 2022's Maker of the Year. How have you found that? Like, how the hell?
Look, it's as much of a surprise to everyone else as it was to me.
I don't think it is a surprise. But like, when I saw the short list of projects, I'm like, who the fuck is Jess Humpston? Where did she come from?
Yeah, right.
And I could have instantly told you that those were the pieces that were going to win, because they're so unique.
Oh, that's nice to hear. Yeah, well, it was a surprise to me, let's put it that way. Yes, I think I never anticipated to win anything of that, caliber so quickly after graduating. But it's such a great outlet for getting your work out there and also connecting people. Like when it was announced that I won, there was just, everyone was so supportive, and people reaching out, via Instagram, just saying congratulations, how did you do it? Like people really delving into all the questions around it. But it was really nice, and also it's not the most important part, but a nice part of it was it came with some money attached to it, which was really nice to set up as an emerging or, a very fresh maker. So that was fantastic. It was really good.
Can I guess what the most asked question was?
I think they were like, how?
I was gonna ask, how much weight can it take?
Well, that actually didn't come to... I think a lot... Actually, no, probably the most last question is, can people actually sit in it? Does it function? Yeah. Answer is yes, you can sit in it. It's definitely not a all-day, everyday task chair, but you can sit in it, and I've had some, people of different body types and weights all sit in it, and it hasn't failed yet, so it's still kicking around.
It's fishing line, right?
Yeah, I was just about to say, let's give everyone a mental image of it. So it's essentially... round. What size are is the dowel? What's its?
They are 24 mil.
24 mil dowels, and the seat and back rest is all monofilament, which is what you say, which is
fishing line. Yeah,
fishing line. It's a very fancy
word. Fishing line. Yeah.
I think now that we know that you have a background in fashion, I think it definitely starts to inform that piece.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I think no matter, and I think as woodworkers, we generally come to it from like lots of different backgrounds. I think it's whether it's sort of a trade or design or something else entirely. I think whatever your background is, it'll work its way in eventually. And I think it's sort of with that piece in particular, it's happened. Yeah.
I'm really interested in how, for want of a better word, new woodworkers like yourself at the time, say when you were designing that chair, for example, you obviously have an idea for the overall design, but at the time you were thinking about what it was going to look like. Did you have any idea of how you were actually going to make it, or did you just kind of come up with the form, and then kind of scratch your head and say, how are we actually going to make dowels into join at weird angles and weird places? Because from my point of view, if I gave myself 4 seconds to think about making that chair, I would just kind of go, I've got no, like, I don't think I want to deal with dowels, joining dowels. Like, it's like, oh, God, like, how do you do it?
I think that's fair. And I think maybe because I was very fresh to it, I didn't realize how difficult it would be. That was like the naivety sort of helped a little bit. But I didn't, in this instance, I didn't think about how it would join together when I was designing it. I knew I wanted to make something ultra light and, very light on materials. And I knew I wanted to make something with a weaving component to it and sort of a skeletal structure. And that was sort of where I started. And then I had to date, prior to that, I'd been sort of modelling up a lot of pieces in CAD because I know, 3D modelling from my other profession. But this one, there was no way that I could design it in a 3D sort of mock-up. So I think I just went back and forth between drawing and modelling, and I think modelling was the key component in this. I made a lot of 1 to 10 scale models in different iterations and really worked out what type, how the structure would work physically with triangulation, getting it as strong as I could and as light as I could. And then from those 10 scale models, I moved to a 1-to-1 mock-up it was like, this thing looked so rough. It was really scary to look at. I think even one person described it as disturbing when they saw it. And it was essentially a series of, really rough dowels of the size I wanted, 24 mil. And I can't remember where I came up with that, but I think it was sort of as light as I could go without compromising strength. And it had nails in the end of it, and I just sort of whacked them in and pulled them apart and put it back together, and it was held together with giant rubber bands, and someone might walk past it or sneeze and it would literally fall apart. It was really tricky. And then I was like, I know that this is going to work in some way, but I needed the joinery, and I needed to make another version of it to actually know how it would, if it would physically make it work together. So I had to make a really good sort of prototype of it, and then even then I had made it and I couldn't sit in it to see if it was comfortable or take weight until I had woven it. So it was quite a process to get it to a sittable prototype. So it was and I think along the way I probably wanted to give up quite a few times because it was really tricky. And I think in the dark times of a design process, what keeps you going is it always has to be interesting, and I always needed to be learning something. I was like, I really want to nail this sort of triangulation and structure and getting something as light as possible. So I think it was pure stubbornness that got me through making it.
It just shows the real benefit. We've spooked it before about physical model making. Like, not everyone has CAD skills, and even people like yourself who do have CAD skills, there's times where it's just quicker and better. Like, a CAD model is all very good, but unless you have serious CAD knowledge, you're never going to be able to test structural capabilities in it. But the second that you glue that balsa model together and use different sizes and different triangles, as you say, you instantly know, you get the feedback from the model as to what is working. So it's a big call to people out there. If you don't have the CAD skills, you don't need them. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think even sometimes in my previous couple of pieces I'd made before this chair, I'd made them largely, models and drawing, but also the final sort of model was made in CAD, a CAD program. And you could sort of tell that it had been made in a CAD program in a way. I was sort of designing in extrusions and planar elements, which is really nice. And I like that in terms of an aesthetic, but I think this one, you can tell that it wasn't designed in that way. And I think often you can see sort of where the genesis of the design process is.
And the weaving, how long did that take?
Oh, yeah. So that, I think I had finished the piece and then I took it home over like a rainy Southern Highlands weekend, and I just watched 10 movies, and I think I did it over a few days, and I had to take it apart and put it back together. And, you know, if I did it again, it would maybe take half a day or something like that. But it took a
half
couple
a day is
of days.
pretty good.
Yeah, it's not
because
bad.
that's a lot of line.
It is a lot. It is a lot of
Can I
fun.
ask the rebates for the filament in the top rail? Did you do that using a router and a jig or a lathe? Or
I did.
How did you?
I did. I didn't use a lathe at all for this piece. The plan is to make another version of it on the lathe and just to sort of compare technique and time spent on it. But this one was entirely made on the router. And for the little, I don't know what you call it, the little fillets, I just made like a cradle jig for the router and little spaces at certain increments, and just sort of, you know, like a little Pez dispenser, would take it out, put it over, and then turn it, next one over, like that, yeah. So it was a very jig focused piece when it came to the finishing stages of it.
You made the tenons as well on a router, router table?
Router. I was going to ask you that, yeah.
I did. Yeah.
Because, you know, when I saw it, I thought this is an interesting use of greenwood furniture technique in like a dry wood. You know, if you've seen greenwood chairs and you have like,
true.
have you seen those drill bits that just form the tenons on like rough greenwood sticks? And I figured that's what you use, like a giant pencil sharpener that just made a kind of drill on the end. And if you wanted to make more of them, I would maybe look into using one of those, because you could make a tenon in about 2 minutes.
I don't think I even knew about that when I was making it. So, I made it entirely on the router table, but potentially for another piece. Yeah.
Wow. I know Adam Savage talked about once when he got into sewing, and he was harping on at length about how similar sewing was to making in general and woodworking as well, prop making, model making. And the fact that you're dealing with essentially two-dimensional forms in the plan, and then you can fold those into three-dimensional shapes. And he was doing it from a point of view of being, say, a woodworker first and going back to and learning sewing, and you've kind of done it the other way around. Do you feel there's a pretty big crossover there?
I think so. Yeah. I don't think I think about it every day and sort of in my making process, but I guess it's in there anyway. But I think, when you're pattern making, you're making a flat object into a 3D form, and I think that thinking drives through. And even simple things like, you know, in the finishing process, if you've got a dent in your work, you put water on it and you iron it out. It's just like a big piece of fabric. Yeah.
So that's the chair. That was obviously the last big piece. Are you working on anything spectacular or big at the moment?
I don't know if I'd describe it as big or spectacular, but I'm definitely working away at a few pieces. I think I'm working to exhibitions at the moment and competitions. So I've got a new piece coming up for Design Fringe in a few weeks' time. And also I actually did send the chair off recently to Tasmania for Clarence Art Prize, which is exciting. And
congratulations on the shortlisting.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm actually heading off next week, which will be really nice. And then I've got a group exhibition with a few ex-Sturties next year at Craft ACT. So making a few additional pieces for that as well.
What's the future plan then? Like, do you have a goal as in terms of, say, in the woodworking part of your life at least? Do you want to be making your own pieces spec? Do you want to reproduce things that you're making currently, or work bespoke pieces for clients, or you just want to stay kind of in the space you are, just being creative?
Yeah, I think I'm still figuring it out. So I'm obviously in the early stages of it, and I think I think I'm basically in my self-indulgent phase where I'm just making what I like and really refining my processes and my sort of aesthetic. I think I really want to develop who I am as a designer, woodworker, maker, and then hopefully people will come to me potentially after they know really what I'm about.
Right.
But I'm also in the process of making like a range of, not necessarily one sort of aesthetic driving them, but I want to, create a range of pieces that cover, typologies of furniture, and develop those. And I don't know if I'm going to go down the bespoke commission route. I don't know if I necessarily have acquired the speed yet that it requires, it takes to be really successful in that realm. Maybe that's, further down the track. But I think if people respond really well to the pieces that I'm making now, and then maybe sort of tweaks to those, for customization or, just generally reproducing a range of pieces as people like, then I think that's what I'm heading towards.
Have you done any commission work in the past for maybe friends and family?
I actually haven't to date. No,
right.
It has not happened yet. I think a lot of people are like, maybe in the future, but it hasn't happened yet. So I think I've just been, very self-indulgent and just making what I want to make, which I think it's really important as well. And I've sort of structured my life in a way where I have a steady stream of income from, another field of work, so I can make the things I want to make and not necessarily have to churn out bread and butter pieces, which, those, I think that has benefits as well. You really hone your craft and speed and accuracy and all those things, but it's just not the way I've structured things at the moment.
It's a really interesting kind of juxtaposition where, like, people like yourself who have got the luxury, I guess, for want of a better term, luxury of time to think and just investigate your forms and design work, and you can really put together, after a long time, you can put together a thoughtful piece. But to sell that for what it's worth for the time you've put into it is just about impossible. And so there's this weird juxtaposition of really nice thought out design versus pieces that can actually be affordable or reproducible. I don't know, what do you think, Bryan, about that kind of idea of super design versus practically being able to actually make it?
I think the way Jess has done it is really clever. I think it's been really methodical. Like, it's gone from, I'll try some woodworking classes. Oh, I quite like this. So what's the next step? Either intern for someone or you go to a school. She went to the best school, so she's learned the skills there. And I don't know, I think it's having the day job and allowing yourself to work on really incredible not commissions, but really incredible self-commissions, and honing your own aesthetic, I think is probably more important than learning the skills, because you can learn the skills. Like 99% of people can learn the skills. Whereas I think learning how to design something requires a lot of inward sort of inflection and a lot of time. And I think having the financial security of a job really, and it makes you really value your time in the workshop, I'm sure, Jess. Like, you're in there every second loving it. Whereas I'm sure a lot of woodworkers who, when they start, you got to make vanities, you got to make bench tops and things, and you're in there going, fuck, why am I doing this? Whereas I remember what it was like for me when I was still working in architecture. I'd leave the office at 6 p.m, arrive in the workshop, and I'm like, yes, this is where I want to be. I kind of miss an element of that.
I will say, I've harped on about this forever, so tell me to shut up. But having constraints, what I really love about getting a client commission is that you're constrained automatically by what their space they have for whatever the object is. And so that automatically makes you think differently about how you're going to design something. And whenever I've tried to design a piece on spec for myself, I don't give myself constraints. And so everything's a bit non-defined. And so sometimes I think getting that really firm has to be this size or it's not working really makes you think outside the box a bit more. But
it's got to be made to this budget.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
True.
Like, and so that's maybe, I don't know, Jess, you could tell a friend to give you some constraints on a piece and just see what your brain does with it, because I think it's such a good exercise.
Yeah, I agree. No, I agree. And I think, maybe this comes from my background and, current practice in design is I give myself a brief. Obviously, I can break that brief if I want to. I'm my own client at this stage. But I think giving, like you're saying, if you give yourself edges, parameters, it really forces you to be creative and think things through and find the edges of what that design could be. And also what it does is allow you to make decisions really quickly. If you give yourself a set of rules, and everything has to tie it back and make sense to those rules that you apply to yourself, then it makes the design process really easy if you set it up at the beginning. And I think it's really important because obviously there's so much content out there and there's so much good design currently and historically that you can draw upon. And if you don't give yourself the boundary, you end up becoming quite derivative. So I think if you, give yourself those edges, whether they're aesthetic, budget-driven, size-driven, functionality as well, I think even if it's just for yourself, I think a brief is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask you about the hallway mounted pieces?
The very skinny mounted pieces. Yeah, so I think
I love those pieces.
Oh, thank you.
It's probably because my old architect brain likes straight lines. I like linear things.
Yes,
and it's always been the way in which I've designed, but I definitely see those as sort of mini scaled down bits of architecture. Tell us about where they've ended up or the design process for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So those pieces I did design when I was studying at Sturt, and if we're talking about brief, those pieces were largely derived out of lack of material. We were in lockdown and we couldn't we actually couldn't go and buy any more timber, so I had to look through my racks as to what I have and design around that. And in terms of functionality, I wanted components of the storage and function that you would find in a hallway table upon entry, but where I've lived to date and probably where I'll continue to live are small places that don't have a hallway necessarily. They don't have the space. So I think it was about compact design and also designing within the material sort of restraints that I had available to me. And also I wanted to learn as much as possible. I wanted to learn how to do pivot drawers.
Yeah, the little knife hinges are class.
Yeah, and I really wanted to learn how to do that. So I wanted to learn as much as possible during my time at Sturt. I was like, okay, I want to learn X, Y, Z. So I made a series of 3 so I could insert different sort of learnings into each of them. And the pivot drawers were largely inspired by Eileen Gray's pieces, who was another sort of architect designer based in the 30s. And I, wanted to emulate that. And that was kind of the components of it, really. So it was, again, a brief-driven piece, and for compact living, and also a small amount of material as well.
Can those hinges take much weight? So just for everyone listening, it's essentially a small box in a shelf that pivots on 2 hinges, top and bottom?
Yeah, that's right.
So it sort of rotates out on that. Is it, is that quite a solid, A, can it take a lot of weight, and B, is there a bit of movement in that? So, or is it quite, I would imagine the hinges, it must be pretty good quality.
Yeah, they, the piece is very small. It's the piece is 90 mil high and about, I think, 130 mil deep. So
okay.
So
it's so easy to be fooled by the scale of it because
I was expecting at least 200.
No. And so really the compartment that hinges out and back in is designed to hold a pair of sunglasses. So
I've just found the photo with the sunglasses.
Okay, there you go. Yes. For sunglasses for scale, and you actually couldn't fit that much in. That would sort of affect the weight of the weight capacity of the hinges. So I don't know what the weight capacity of them is, but you're not going to exceed it in this piece because it's so small.
Are they little? Are they Brusso ones?
They're not Brusso. They're Gurner hinges.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But the Gurner hinges, they came with a 2 mil sort of spacer in the middle, which it was sort of when I got the hinges delivered, I felt that the scale, it was a bit out of scale for the fineness of the piece. So I popped them out and I turned them down on a metal lathe. So sort of bastardized them a little bit, but yes, they work really well.
Yeah, it's a very, very cool idea. Very cool idea.
Can you tell us, so the interior company that you work for now, is it an architect or interior designer?
Architecture and interiors, yeah. It's
architecture and interiors?
Yeah. So it's a large scale firm. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Still enjoying that?
I am. Look, I think that I get something out of both worlds, that I'm sort of, have one foot in each. I think I, really stretch my design and scale, design brain in terms of my everyday work and, aligning to clients' brief and functionality and sort of budget and all these things. And then I really get to know, I get to obviously make in my workshop and engage with material at a really sort of intimate scale and learn sort of the edges of that, which is, what craft is. And so I sort of get both. I think I gain something out of both. So yes, I am enjoying it, but I think I'm enjoying it more because I'm part-time, not full-time.
Do you find you have a new perspective at all in doing interior design, where you've got maybe more idea of furniture and the capability of timber and what it can bring to a room?
Absolutely. And I think maybe not even just in terms of furniture, I think in terms of really understanding how things work and how they may, how they'll be made, and really trying to drill down into that. And also I think I just tend to go for minute details now because of the work that I've done in terms of furniture. I really hone in on these key items. But I think in terms of really thinking about material and how things go together, not that I wasn't thinking about that before, but this is, it's added an additional layer to my work. And also, sorry.
I was going to say, it sounds like music to my ears, because occasionally I'll get interior designers send through their designs or proposals for a room which will include some bespoke piece of furniture, which is why they come to me. And the design is unworkable. Nobody's thought about how it's going to be made. They just want it to look like they want it to look. And it's so frustrating. And having somebody like yourself who understands at least how things can be made or what limitations are, it makes such a difference to the person who's actually got to do the work in the workshop.
Yeah, totally. I guess, a lot of designers provide design intent and, you figure out the rest. But I think also in my work, and what drew me to furniture in particular was that when you're working in interiors, you largely do a lot of fit outs of existing buildings, and maybe they've been, a hotel, a restaurant, another bank in the past, and they want to become something else. There's a churn aspect to it. Often in interiors, sort of everything gets a bit tired after 7 to 10 years, which is quite sad and not great in terms of sustainability. But what I found from a lot of fit outs was that the thing that would maybe move from, one fit out to the next was a really quality piece of furniture. It sort of stood the test of time, and we would, go in and do audits of existing fit outs with the thought to sort of revamp everything, and we would really pick out and hone in on quality pieces of furniture, and they would be the things that would traverse through to the next stage of the interior. So I think it's really important. Good quality furniture pieces just sort of stand the test of time, and I found that was really interesting, and that's sort of what made me hone in on furniture making as sort of a sustainable design practice.
It is really interesting, because I thought I was the only one who noticed that kind of thing. If I go to a hotel or something and I'm just zeroing in on the pieces of furniture that are nice or not nice, or what thought has been given to what, but any piece of freestanding furniture, typically there's a couple of hotels that I'm thinking of specifically, they just have such nice pieces that you just want to hang out in the foyer and just kind of be with them, but that's me being a furniture, wood geek, but maybe other people feel the same. I don't know.
I think so. And I think even if you're not, really gun-ho interested in furniture or design, you just absorb it anyway. You absorb quality of pieces, whether it's comfort or, the warmth of timber or whatever it is. You may not be hyper aware of it, but I think you feel it in some way.
Talking about that, do you have we tend to talk to two different groups of people on the show. There's the person who's got a love for design and they know a list of designers off the top of their head and they get influenced by them and that's a part of their life. And then you get the other group which just, I see, I make, that's it. It's as simple as that. Do you have a good understanding of the history of design and people before you, and do you draw on that, or has that just never really been part of your process?
I think it is. I think because I have studied design and have always been interested in design, I have my favorites. I'm definitely not a movement loyalist, but I really draw a lot of inspiration from other makers, certainly. And I think it's important to know sort of where you've come from and why things work, and things work for a reason. So it's really important to sort of, drill down into your history. For me, it is. It might not be necessarily for everybody, but for me, absolutely. And there's definitely, depending on the job or the project that I have coming up, I might sort of pick and choose from an array of different designers, or it might just be a honing in on a detail of some obscure piece that I have no idea what it is from whatever time period, I don't know. But there's definitely my favourites that I always return to, whether they're designer makers or designers who worked really closely with craftspeople. I think that back in the day, that was a really interesting relationship. Like one person I always look back to is Charlotte Perrion. She wasn't a maker necessarily, but she was an architect and a furniture designer, and she just has such a great repertoire of work and such a sensitivity to how people use her pieces of furniture and how it sits within the interior or within a space. So she's a hero of mine, including, some makers as well. So like Krenov, which I was introduced to when I was at Sturt, and Nakashima, who just has such a defined aesthetic. Yeah, I definitely.
I think you're right. I think it's really important because we've had this discussion a few times about plagiarism and influences and what's original and all that kind of stuff. And you have to realize like there are only so many different ways that you can put two bits of timber together. But I think if you have multidisciplinary influences, you've obviously got fashion, interiors, architecture, sculpture, and you start to pick and choose different bits and bring them together. That's what original design is, I think. Rather than trying to be original about a simple piece of joinery. It's more the overall design language that you're creating by doing that research. So it is really important, rather than just people hanging out on Instagram and following their 2 or 3 favorite makers, but to look beyond furniture design a bit, I think, is what creates real originality.
Yeah, there's so much to draw on, I think, and not just for woodworking. Yeah, like you said, sculpture, architecture, fashion, some great fashion designers out there, and even fashion designers who forayed into furniture making, which is also really interesting, like a Rick Owens or Dion Lee or something like that. Yeah,
interesting.
Talking about inspiration, I was looking at that. I don't know I'm just looking at what the name of the piece is. It's that sort of entry table,
yes,
hall table. The way you've done that little detail on the feet. That's such an interesting little detail, and you talk about not just looking, or Bryan, you were saying not just looking at your 3 makers and sticking with that. I'm going to steal that idea from you if you're okay with that, because that's really cool.
yeah, and
I've never seen it done like that. It's really cool.
And I don't know where that came from necessarily. I think it was a functional. It's got better balance when it's up on its little point on its feet.
Yeah.
But maybe I found it in I actually don't know where I got that from, but it's yours. There you go. Take it.
Cool. Thank you.
You see it as well in one of the wall mounted pieces. You've kind of got a step down. There's a shelf on one side of it, and there's a step down.
Oh yeah.
Like having the intuition to do something like that, as opposed to just leaving it all the same height. It adds a real interest and I don't know, creates different focal points to the piece. That I think you can only. Well, I might be wrong, but I think you can only develop that kind of intuition by really doing your research on design. I don't think that's something that comes natural.
I think it's about learning what the possibilities are. It's like, well, this person did it in this way. Maybe I could, push it a little bit further in the other direction. It's not copying. I think it's sort of learning about possibilities of design. Yeah.
Because it's also got the potential to go wrong.
Oh,
so you've got to have the chutzpah to have a crack and
fail.
And fail, yeah.
And fail, yeah. I mean, I've made some horrible pieces, and I think I've just been stubborn to sort of see it through. And I think I've just almost finished a piece at the moment, which I got maybe 80% of the way through, and I was like, I cannot with this. Like, it's not what I wanted, and you could see the effort in it, and which is not what I think I always strive for. It should look as simple as possible. It should look effortless, and you could see it in it, and I hated it. Sort of went through the darkness, the dark days, and then I changed it completely. I chopped the legs off, I burnt it, I did this and I did that, and it's come out the other side. It's not my favorite piece, but I sort of stuck with it. And I think it's sometimes, you can know exactly what it's going to look like on the other side, but sometimes you need to let the piece tell you what it wants to be. Let the process, let the material or the piece drive it. So sometimes you have to switch gears and sit in the back seat a little bit, I think.
I thought you were going to say you just bend it completely.
I almost did. I almost did.
I love the idea, what you said about having like pieces that that look awful or that you hate or whatever. And all of us have made pieces that are just like, no one needs to see it. But it would be awesome to have an Instagram account with just
fails,
all the fails that people just admit to, like these awful ideas. It would be a fun kind of visual guide of what not to do, maybe.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, well let's call it there because we're coming up on time. Jess, thanks so much for coming on the show and
thanks for having
telling us your story. It's been great. We've talked about having you on the show for a while, and in particular talking about that piece. So it's
cool.
It's great to finally bring that to fruition.
It's pretty incredible to have a conversation like about we've seen 5 finished pieces of yours or 4 or 5 to have a conversation that in depth. So congratulations on everything and best of luck for Clarence.
Thank you.
I've got a good feeling about it.
Oh, stop! We'll see.
But yeah, if anybody doesn't know Clarence Prize, give it a Google. I think the shortlist came out last week, did it? Or a couple weeks ago?
I think a little while ago.
But give it a Google. There's some fabulous pieces on
it. Yeah.
Cool. All right, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will talk to you next time.
Very good. See ya.
See you guys.